October 2019, Beijing. The DF-41 was on full display as it marched by the viewing platform during the global observation of China's 70-year anniversary military parade. Each of these giant vehicles carried one massive missile, which was so large that it had to be carried by a 16-wheeled transporter. A weapon capable of striking any point of Earth with 10 independently targeted nuclear warheads. Then there is the mobility platform, which can remain hidden in China's vast countryside and strike in minutes. The missile will be traveling at speeds of 20 times the sound barrier, rendering interception inconceivable. It's been dubbed a game-changer by Western military strategists. Others label it the beginning of the end of America's dominance in the Pacific. The Dongfeng 41 or East Wind 41 is the culmination of China's ballistic missile technology. The DF-41 was under development in the 1990s, but it remained under wraps all those years as various spy agencies caught glimpses of the missile through spy satellite photos and occasional missile tests. And yet China did not confirm the missile's existence until the 2019 military parade. The DF-41 is an intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, and there is only one purpose it was intended for. And this is the delivery of nuclear warheads to targets on the other side of the globe. The DF-41 is now operational since 2017, but this is still classified information. The information we have is gathered through various intelligence sources, observations of the DF-41 on Chinese military parades, and occasional Chinese military revelations on their capabilities. These specs are truly frightening. The DF-41 reportedly has a range of 15,000 kilometers, or about 9,300 miles. This is enough to strike the entire continental United States from mainland China. Every city, military base, and critical target inside America is within range. There is no place in America that is safe from this missile. Range by itself is not by any means what sets the DF-41 apart as a uniquely potent missile. What is so threatening is the fact that it is a MIRV missile. What MIRV stands for is multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. In simpler language, this is a weapon that takes 10 nuclear warheads and delivers them all in one missile, targeting 10 separate destinations. You fire one DF-41 and you're hitting 10 cities. The delivery system adds to this danger. In contrast to the fixed, above-ground silos used by the U.S. for their ICBMs, the DF-41 uses mobile transporter erector launcher vehicles, often referred to as TELs. These behemoths are capable of being deployed as long as China's roads reach, and they're launched within minutes and then relocate. Once this is finished, they're extremely tricky to wipe out while still on the ground. The DF-41 is fueled with solid fuel and does not need liquid propellants. This is very important. Other liquid-fueled missiles require preparation and waiting for several hours before being launched, giving the enemy enough time to act on the signal and respond accordingly. The fact is that by the time satellites spot the DF-41 as it is being launched, the missile will be on its mission. The implications of this are being closely followed by the NATO leadership, as the leadership feels betrayed by this move by China, which for decades kept only a nuclear deterrent strength of 300 nuclear warheads in total. The agenda then was clear, and this nuclear program is now undergoing a drastic transformation. Intelligence reports point to an increase in the nuclear warheads of China to 1,000 by 2030, and the DF-41 missile is right at the center of this plan. The implications are very clear. China is capable of striking first and still retaining enough weapons to deter attack. This entirely reverses the nuclear balance, which is why there hasn't been any war between the great powers since the end of the Cold War. In order to understand the DF-41's defense-resistant qualities, it is necessary to break down the stages following missile deployment. The DF-41 flies on a ballistic path, reaching into the stratosphere and then into orbit as it returns toward the target. Once reaching the terminal point of flight, the DF-41 is high enough, hundreds of miles above Earth, as the nose cone separates and deploys the warheads. Those 10 warheads do not simply come crashing down together, each one has its own guidance and control capability, then they separate and modify their courses individually to head for different destinations, potentially hundreds of miles apart. But it only gets worse. Mixed in among the live warheads are deceptive warheads, chaff, and electronic countermeasures intended to confuse missile defense systems. The Defender is trying to follow all this action, and they're seeing as many as dozens of warheads, including both fake and real ones. When entering Earth's atmosphere, this type of warhead is flying at hypersonic velocities, reaching Mach 20 or faster. At this rate, intercepting this warhead is mathematically difficult. It's about trying to hit a bullet with another bullet, except both are flying at 20 times the speed of sound with only seconds to react. The mobility element is very important, and the DF-41's transportation erector launcher is simply a 16-axle behemoth weighing over 50 tons fully laden. It is clear, of course, that it needs very good roads, and indeed, China is building roads appropriate to carry this type of weaponry. The People's Liberation Army has laid down thousands of miles of strategic roads, leading from military bases to tunnel systems and dispersal areas in central and northern China. The startup procedure is indicative of the readiness of the weaponry. The tail positions itself, elevators raise the missile to vertical, and the unloading of the target data takes only seconds. And the startup procedure takes less than 5 minutes to begin the mission. After the mission, the missile lowers and moves on, ready for reload if the second missile is available. Put this in comparison to America's chief ICBM, the Minuteman III, which dates from the 1970s and is launched from buried silos, whose locations have been charted by all America's enemies for decades. The Minuteman III is dependable, well cared for, and very powerful, but it is static and invisible on the ground. America's nearest equivalent is the Russian RS-24 Yars with mobility and MIRV capability, but less than optimal mobility on Russia's infrastructure compared to China's roads. The DF-41 is more representative of a later generation of technology. The latest technology, advanced computer systems, and learning from experience gained through decades of observation of American and Russian systems. This is no Cold War era system simply modified for the modern era. This is no merely improved deterrent, but an entirely different tool tailored to vulnerabilities within modern missile defense systems. The likely yield on each warhead is 150 to 300 kilotons. Perspective is afforded by the fact that the Hiroshima atom bomb stood at 15 kilotons. The DF-41 can deliver 10 to 20 times this level of destructive capability in one warhead. Multiply this by 10 warheads the missile carries, and the level of destruction achievable by one of these systems becomes clear. The MIRV system enables tactical flexibility. Target 10 different cities to achieve maximum political effect. Use several warheads on the same hardened target to guarantee destruction, alternate between military and civilian targets to confuse defense strategy. The need for tactical flexibility renders this weaponry useful in limited nuclear war or total mutual destruction. The DF-41 stands for much more than simply invention and research. It marks the beginning of a paradigm shift in the nuclear war policies being adopted by China. The DF-41 is being adopted by China, which for so many decades followed the no first use nuclear policy and possessed low levels of nuclear weaponry, capable of retaliation only after an attack by an enemy, which is set to change as China aims to develop assured destruction capability, retaining the strength to destroy the enemy after withstanding damage from an attack. This is fraught with very dangerous ambiguity. Is China pursuing the capability for second strike deterrence, or is trying to develop first strike capability under the guise of defense preparation? The implications are extremely significant, as this will have a critical effect on how foreign governments react and how rapidly any crisis may develop into nuclear conflict. The likely targets of this weaponry are, of course, apparent. U.S. military bases throughout the Pacific region are within striking range. The Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, Marine bases in Okinawa, and the extensive facilities at Pearl Harbor are all potentially vulnerable to attack, which could be launched within 30 minutes of notice. But extending beyond the Pacific, the entire continental U.S. becomes the potential target. Minuteman missile bases in Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota, strategic air bases, command and control centers, east and west coast cities. In the Taiwan scenario, the presence of the DF-41 itself alters the calculus. With the US extending its nuclear umbrella to protect Taiwan, China can now threaten nuclear attacks on US soil. The entire point of extended deterrence and the nuclear umbrella is now called into question. Will the commitment still be good if Los Angeles is at risk? There are questions being asked by European members of NATO. If America is so vulnerable to Chinese nuclear attacks, will it risk San Francisco to protect Warsaw against Russia? The DF-41 strike missile does not have to strike to be successful. The presence of this capability is enough to raise questions within alliances that have been in place for 70 years. The missile defense dilemma is a mathematical and harsh reality. The U.S. has enough systems such as THAAD and Aegis, capable of intercepting ballistic missiles, and they're fully competent against single targets or small salvos. However, they're never intended to address the issue of saturating attacks. The DF-41 missile carries 10 warheads and decoys. Launch 10 DF-41 missiles and this will translate to 100 targets and potentially hundreds of deceptive signals. The defender will only have 44 ground-based interceptors to defend the entire nation. The economics are highly in favor of the attacker. Each of the interceptors will cost about $75 million. Each DF-41 will cost, with 10 warheads, perhaps $100 million. China can improve striking power for less than America can improve defenses. There is no point in considering total missile defense. Now for the catch that changes everything, the DF-41 has never been tested at full range with a complete payload. China has conducted several test launches, but they have been to ranges of 5,000 to 8,000 kilometers, less than half the claimed maximum range. No test has demonstrated the full 15,000 kilometer capability, with 10 MIRV warheads separating and striking independent targets. This matters because ICBMs are extraordinarily complex machines. Everything must work perfectly under extreme conditions. The slightest manufacturing defect, the smallest software glitch, and a multi-million-dollar weapon becomes an expensive firework. The United States and Russia have conducted thousands of test launches over decades to achieve confidence in their systems. China has conducted perhaps a dozen with the DF-41, and the difference between a parade showpiece and a combat-ready weapon is vast. Those missiles rolling through Tiananmen Square looked impressive, but were they loaded with real warheads? Were their guidance systems fully functional, or were they shells designed to look intimidating for the cameras? Intelligence suggests significant quality control issues in Chinese military manufacturing, particularly in the most sensitive technologies like nuclear warhead miniaturization and MIRV separation systems. The mobile launchers present their own problems. Yes, they can move, but they cannot move invisibly. American surveillance satellites monitor China constantly. Modern synthetic aperture radar can track vehicle movements through clouds and at night. When a DF-41 TEL leaves its garrison, U.S. intelligence knows about it. When it moves to a launch position, that activity is detected. The launchers require specific infrastructure. They need roads capable of handling 50-ton vehicles. They need command vehicles, support trucks, security perimeters. All of this creates signatures that can be tracked. Once a TEL reaches a firing position, the launch preparation sequence creates additional signatures. Radio communications, power generation, personnel movement, and these indicators give warning, reducing the surprise advantage that mobile missiles are supposed to provide. The warhead problem cuts to the core of the DF-41's capability. Building a nuclear warhead small enough to fit 10 into a missile nose cone while maintaining high yield requires sophisticated technology. China's nuclear weapons program is younger and less experienced than American or Russian programs. Evidence suggests Chinese miniaturization technology lags behind by perhaps a decade or more. This means the claimed 10 warheads might be theoretical rather than operational. The actual deployed configuration might be 6 warheads, or 4, or even single warheads with the rest of the space used for decoys and penetration eggs. Without full testing, even Chinese commanders cannot be certain how many warheads will successfully separate and hit their targets. Command and control represents another vulnerability. China's nuclear forces operate under highly centralized control, with launch authority resting exclusively with the Central Military Commission. This structure prevents unauthorized launches but creates problems in actual conflict. If communication links are severed through jamming, cyber attack, or physical destruction of relay stations, mobile launchers become orphaned assets unable to receive orders, or orders to launch are genuine. This creates dangerous instability during a crisis, where the system designed for deterrence becomes a trigger for accidental war. Finally, the economic sustainability question. Maintaining a mobile ICBM force is extraordinarily expensive. Each TEL requires constant maintenance, specially trained crews, secure facilities, and regular exercises to maintain readiness. China is building this capability from scratch, while the United States and Russia have decades of institutional knowledge and infrastructure already in place. The broader nuclear triad problem compounds this. China lacks a credible strategic bomber force comparable to American B-2s and B-52s. Chinese ballistic missile submarines are noisy and easily tracked compared to American Ohio-class boats. This means China's deterrent relies almost entirely on land-based missiles like the DF-41. If those are vulnerable or unreliable, the entire deterrent collapses. So, what do you think about it? Share in the comments section. See you in the next one.